with the kind of realities that the majority of black people in this country live under. We need a radical change. I get criticized all the time. I've been called a biased journalist. I've been called a white monopoly capital journalist. I've been called a Tumamina journalist. I've been called a radical leftist,
so you're all
racist
of those things
journalist.
at once.
I'm everything at once. Who takes over from Eusebius?
Yeah.
I mean, think of it. I used to listen to this guy every day. I was obsessed with him. Pala pala question that I asked clearly ruffled the feathers, and they were probably scared that other media houses were going to do that.
Wow. Spread the fire. Welcome back to SMWX today. I'm really excited to be joined by a media legend, Clement Manyathela. And before we get into our conversation, remember to take us to 150,000 subscribers, like and share. Clement, thank you so much for joining us on SMWX.
Thank you so much, Sizo. It's great to be here.
You are really developing into something of a media legend in these GNU times. But your status went a notch further when you were brought onto stage by Adele for your birthday. Like,
right?
How does that even work? How did that happen?
What are the chances?
Yeah, like
I always go away during my birthday. And this year I realized that Adele is going to be in Munich in Germany. And I realized early this year in April, I was like, I'm getting tickets, and I got them immediately. And all I wanted was to get good tickets, like the golden circle kind of tickets as a birthday gift to myself, and be literally next to Adele when she performs.
Yeah.
And that for me was the amazing birthday gift I got myself. And I didn't know that the heavens were somehow planning something of a big surprise. So when she was singing and she just saw me singing along, and she called me and another South African lady whom I don't know, by the way.
Wow.
We met there.
Yeah.
And I just realized, you guys are from South Africa, right? And they said, yes. I was like, oh, we hugged each other. Yeah. And then we sang along together. So yeah, and then she called us on stage, and I was like, whoa.
So you weren't expecting it at all?
I was not expecting it. I mean, I was shaking getting up the stairs, and if you saw the video, all I was doing was I just wanted to capture the moment, because I didn't even trust that my friends are going to capture the moment for me.
Yeah.
And as Adele said, it's like, you're not even recording. The whole time I thought I was recording, and I actually wasn't, because I was just so excited and I was so shaking. But what a moment.
What a moment. What a moment. What was it like being on the stage and seeing the crowd?
So to be honest with you, I mean, there was 80,000 people in the stadium.
Yeah.
80,000 people.
Yeah.
All I remember was I couldn't see the crowd, because I was in a moment of shock. You know, when when people get involved in accidents, they don't sometimes even feel the pain in the moment until later on when they're in hospital or when they go for checkup. That was me. Like, I was caught up in a moment of shock, and in my mind, I didn't even realize there are 80,000 people who are looking at me on stage. And I was just recording, trying to capture this moment with her. So yeah, it was a moment of shock. I only realized and took everything in probably when I got to the hotel. Because even when I was leaving the concert venue, I became somewhat of a celebrity in Germany.
Wow.
Everybody was giving me hugs. Oh my God, do you know how lucky you are?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm from Singapore and I hoped I could be on that stage. So when I got to the hotel, I couldn't sleep the whole night. And I just called my brother and I called my sister. I was like, this just happened. And I sat there and I took it in. I was like, do you actually realize that you are so lucky?
Yeah.
What are the chances? So it was crazy, man.
Amazing. I mean, you're on our screens, you're on our radio. I think in this particular political moment have become one of the most important journalists in our country at the moment. But I don't know much about you before that. I saw on your LinkedIn profile that you grew up, or you were born, or your childhood was in
Vaalbank, yeah.
In Mpumalanga. Can you tell us more about your upbringing and the moment you realized you'd become interested in the media landscape? So
I grew up in Vaalbank. It's a village in Mpumalanga in KwaNdebele. And it was like a humble upbringing at home in Mpumalanga with my mom and my dad. And I grew up there. I went to school there until grade 12, until I came to Pretoria to study at the University of Pretoria. Honestly, I didn't know that I wanted to be a journalist. What I do remember is that I wanted to somehow be in the media. I do remember, wanting to be a TV presenter. So I would do things with some of my friends where they take videos of me saying, "Welcome to my show. My name is Clement Manyathela." Wow. I used to do things like that, skits like that when I was probably in high school.
We must find these videos.
No, do not find the videos. So that's really how the journey began. But I come from a village, Sizo, where it was very difficult to find even inspiration. A lot of the people in my community were unemployed, or they were bus drivers, or they were security officers when they finished matric. So it was very difficult to also sort of relate with somebody else in the community and say, "Oh, I just want to be like that," who is a chartered accountant. I mean, I remember one doctor in the community that we knew of, but who stayed too far from my home. But I was terrible in maths and science, so I wasn't going to make it in medicine school. So it's only when I got to the University of Pretoria and I studied journalism where I thought, first year, second year, I didn't even enjoy it. I was like, is this really what I want to do? Only in my third year, when I started doing practicals at the Pretoria News, I was like, whoa,
right.
I actually like this thing. I love telling stories. And I love, because I was already coming up with questions when I watch a press briefing. And I would think, this politician is really taking us for fools here. And I started watching and I would think, I would ask this question if I was there among those journalists. And that's where really the love for what I do now really began.
Yeah, I was looking back on your career and, there's talk of the 10,000 hours and all of that. And you've really put in a lot of work. Like you arrived on the SABC now and you have your show on 702, but that kind of thing only happens after a lot of work. Do you recall any memories of your early career that, epitomize the work that it takes to realize and learn the craft of journalism?
In the early career, I think, I put in the work. I didn't mind working extra hours in my early days. And I think one of the things that make me enjoy my work more is that I worked and enjoyed being a field reporter.
Right.
And when you talk about early moments in my career, when I was a field reporter, I mean, we used to be sent everywhere. I've covered almost everything. I've covered a business story. I've covered a political story. I've covered a protest in Soweto. I've covered xenophobic attacks. Fees must fall. And I do remember that because I was so passionate, I just wanted to file from, if I arrived on the scene at 7 a.m, I don't mind doing my last crossing to a news bulletin at 8 p.m. in the evening. That's just always been my approach. And I think my editors, Katie Katapodis at the time, appreciated that so much about me. And I think that's where it really began. I just loved the job so much that I wanted to be on the field. I didn't want anybody to take over the story from me. I was like, no, don't send another reporter, PM reporter. I'm fine. I'll do it until 8 p.m. and then I'll take some time off some other time. And I think that's one of the things that have really, I would say, have crafted me to be where I am now. I've always appreciated detail and learning more about the situation. If I'm at Fees Must Fall, I want to be on the ground, speak to everybody, all the stakeholders. By the time I go on air, I need to have all the information that I need. Similarly, so now with radio, I always want to be more prepared than the guests. Like if I'm speaking to an advocate or the legal practice council like I did today, I need to learn more about their responsibilities, role, their constitution, so that I can almost be an expert in the field so that I'm able to converse with you. So I think those are some of the things I learned from early on in the career, where I just wanted to spend so much time immersing myself in the work.
And in terms of your interviews and your interviewing style, how did that come about, and what kinds of things do you do behind the scenes that maybe people don't see? Because the interview is not an easy art. It's unpredictable. You have to be prepared, but then someone takes you into water where you don't know you're going to be taken into. How do you prepare for an interview, and what are the kinds of things that you've learned over time in doing that effectively? So
it's been a transformation, my interviewing style. So there was a time, I was a big fan of our former colleague, Eusebius Makaiser. I used to listen to his shows every day. And I loved his interviewing style. And I was like, ooh, you know, the minute I have my show, this is me.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
And then I also loved Olani Gwala. You know, this is someone I really looked up to. I loved his interviewing style. And it's really changed. I mean, there was a time when I did the midday report on 702 and I was standing in for Xolani when he was sadly diagnosed with cancer. And I took over the show and I took up his kind of interviewing style. And then I remember there was a time when I started doing this show I'm doing now, 9 to 12, which CBS used to do. And I somehow felt compelled to do what he used to do. Like, you know, be tough and...
Yeah.
And then I realized that that's not you, my brother. Take it easy. And then you get to a point where you find yourself. And I think I've found myself. Now, my approach is very simple. I'm always very calm. And I just ask the question. And I'm not going to let you move me on this until I get the answer. Because we've got politicians or, you know, public figures that are also clever. They know how to distract you. Either through fights and they want a screaming match and that's when they're actually going to divert from the real issue. I don't do that. I just remain calm. I'll give you a chance to speak, but I'm going to come in and ask the question. How I prepare for interviews so that I get the most out of my guests is, one, I study the people I interview. And I know some people find this weird, but if I'm going to interview Sizwe, I'm going to watch at least 3 interviews that Sizwe has done. And not because I want to see what kind of questions he's unable to respond to. I want to watch his demeanor because there are some interviewees who are very slow in responding. So when I come in, I need to know that this is going to be my approach. I need to guide them in wheeling them back into the conversation. But there are some people who give one-word answers. I need to try and make them comfortable to sort of give me answers in detail. But I also learn tricks about interviewees. I mean, I can tell you about different politicians and what their style is and what they always try to do. I learn that, and by the time I have a conversation with them, I already know what their approach is, and it's not going to surprise me and it's not going to divert me. So I stick to it. So that's one of the things that I do when I prepare for interviews. And like I said, I read a lot. Too much sometimes that I feel my brain can't take it anymore. Like I read too much. I over-prepare. That's the only time I'm ever comfortable to step into an interview. I can't be just 100%. I need to be 120% prepared.
I was fascinated to hear in our members insert where you expand on this a bit more in a different way, but that you still feel nervous to some extent before a show or before a broadcast. That's such a fascinating insight because when you're up there, you have to look like you're in command and there's almost there's a theater to the interview and the interviewer has to be in control. But we don't allow people to feel or we don't allow broadcasters to be vulnerable sometimes. And we assume that we're interested in what they get out of the guest, but not the toll it takes on them.
True. Oh, it takes a toll, man. It really takes a toll. I get very nervous when I have to get on stage and MC a gig or I'm about to go live on television or on the radio. And I always, as I said to you earlier, I always say a prayer. Like I've got a prayer I say every time I start. I'll say, God, let's do this. Like hold my hand. But it takes a toll. And I think, well, with the kind of work I do on the radio, there's almost like space for you to be vulnerable. But I'm also like a hardcore journalist. At least I consider myself because most of my time, my career, I've spent it on the field reporting as a journalist. So when I started doing this show, they expect you to be vulnerable. They expect you to laugh. They expect you to cry. They expect you to share a nice, sweet moment that made you sad or a nice, sweet moment that made you emotional. And it was very difficult for me in the beginning, but I've come to appreciate that now. Like, you know, I express myself on things and I'll say if something irritates me, if something makes me sad, if something makes me excited. And I'm glad because that space allows for it. It's different when I'm on television because people on television just expect you, give us the interview and give us the story. And that's a completely different ball game. So you get there and you get into character, so to speak, and you do it. But on the radio, there's space there to just be yourself. And I think that's why I appreciate the radio medium so much. I am obsessed with radio. I don't see myself doing anything else because literally that's you. That's an extension of your life. That's you just being yourself on a daily basis, you know.
You mentioned also taking over the show from Eusebius, and I wonder what that was like for you. I mean, you said you were a fan of the show. It was a fixture. Your show is also a fixture now, but did you feel pressure? What was the sense? Because that was such a major show, and anyone who took it over was going to have a hard time actually driving it and making it their own, which you've succeeded in doing to your credit. But what was it like in those early days, you know, taking over such a massive and important show?
Shoo, bro. I cried so much during that time. I did. So I was doing the midday report, and I was about to sign my contract officially to be the host of the midday report. I had done it for a year because Xolani was not okay, and when he sadly passed away, I continued to do it as a stand-in until, you know, and the station made a decision. Okay, you're taking over officially now. Sign a contract.
Right.
I think on the week that I was supposed to sign a contract, my manager says to me, "Hey, we need to talk. Forget the midday report. We need you to do this show." I was like, "Are you kidding me?" No. And I said no immediately. I was like,
really?
You are setting me for failure. I'm not going to do this. And I remember telling a friend that I'm actually going to resign because I just feel like they're forcing me to do something I don't want to do. And they were not really forcing. They were saying, we really think you're going to be great on this slot. And we need someone young. We need someone of your personality. And I said no for about 2 weeks.
Wow.
And they said, go consult. I went and consulted people and I said, no, I'm not ready for this show. I'm still young. It's Eusebius. Are you crazy? Who takes over from Eusebius?
Yeah.
I mean, think of it. I used to listen to this guy every day. I was obsessed with him. And you are telling me that I must take over his show.
Yeah.
That's wild. And I was so depressed during that time because I just thought to myself, oh my goodness, if I do this, am I going to fail? Am I going to lose listeners? And how am I going to survive with that? And what's that going to mean for my career? And I prayed a lot about it. And I decided I'm going to take the job. And it was the most difficult period of probably my life because there were people, even amongst my close friends, who never had confidence in me. I remember a very close friend of mine saying to me, are you sure you want to do this? Are you not scared of failure? I mean, you're taking over from Eusebius. And that's a time when I needed encouragement.
Sure.
So it was very difficult, man. It was so difficult. I was depressed. There was times when callers in the beginning used to call in and, you know, and say, yeah, if it was Eusebius, you would have done this. And you know, stuff like that makes you start now molding yourself in the way that Eusebius used to do things. And that's a wrong way of doing things. When you take over from any show, you need to bring yourself. And one of the things I said to myself was, when I start the show, I'm not getting into anybody's shoes. I can never fit in Eusebius' shoes. I'm bringing my own shoes. And some of people are going to like that. Some of people are not going to like that, but I'm going to build my own community because I'm going to be best at being Clement. I can't be best at trying to portray and being somebody else. So it was a difficult moment in that some of the listeners didn't feel me in the beginning. A lot of them turned around and said, we see what you're doing and we like what you're doing. There are some of the friends who thought, we trended for 2 days on the day. And I remember I was on the phone with Eusebius when they released the statement. We were like, okay, we're switching off our phones. And he said, we switched off our phones. And then they released a statement.
Sure.
It trended and trended. And most people were like, this light boy. How is he going to be able to take over a show like that? What a recipe for disaster. And I didn't see these comments, but some of the people close to me sometimes bring these negative comments, which I never understand. They're like, did you see what this person said about you?
Like, I'm trying to avoid this right now.
I'm like, I logged out Twitter to avoid this. You're bringing it to me. But yeah, I'm so glad, man, of the journey that I've had on this show and the success that we've had, because one lesson that I took there is never underestimate yourself. And don't always be quick enough to say, I cannot do something. And for me, that was an opportunity where I took a leap of faith. And I was like, I'm actually good at what I do. I'm a journalist. What I need to do is to learn the light stuff thing that I never used to do. And then I'll be fine. Yeah. And I mean, I'm about to do 5 years of the show in 2025. And I never thought I would get there. And it's been such a successful show.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've made it your own and, you know, really brought a different angle to what it means to be on that show. So big ups to you for that. Because I can imagine, like, I think many of us in the industry learned a lot from Eusebius, and may his soul rest in peace. But wow, to take over his show, I can only imagine what the pressure was.
Yeah, there was a lot of pressure, man. Yeah. It was a lot of pressure.
Fam, I just wanted to interrupt this episode to let you know the 4 ways you can help SMWX. Way number 1, you can invite me to speak at your institution or company. Way number 2, you can advertise on this channel. Way number 3, you can become a member of this channel. The link to the membership is down below. And number 4, you can buy merch that's books or hoodies. Now let's get back to the episode. All our contact details are in the description box below.
But yeah, for me it was, don't try to be Eusebius. Don't try to fit into his big shoes. Because those are big shoes to fill. Just bring your shoes. Yeah. And you build your own community and just do the work. And that's all I did. And as I said in the beginning, I mean, I tried in the beginning because I was so traumatized by the comments from people, you know, the nasty things people were saying. I tried so hard to be him, you know? I mean, when I did interviews, I tried this kind of interviewing style and it wasn't natural to me until I sat down. I was like, that doesn't sound natural. That's not who you are. Like, just be you. And I was myself up until today. And I'm so glad. I'm so glad I had that journey because there are some life lessons I took from that period of my life.
Yeah. And then to the public broadcaster.
Yeah.
Where
then you get to the... I always get triggered when I have to take over from people because of what happened with Eusebius.
Yeah, sure.
So when I now have to take over from Sizwe, you know, I mean, you student for Eusebius, in fact.
I did.
I mean, you did a couple of shows, but there was a time you did a show for like quite a long time. I think he was on leave. He must have been in Europe at the time. And I remember listening and I was like, wow, what an incredible mind, right?
Yeah. And then that pressure, I felt it for a month, just like in UCB.
Imagine for me.
I was like...
So when the public broadcaster also calls and says, okay, we need you to do this. I was like, oh my God, is this going to be my life? Where the standard is set so high and you think to yourself, am I going to be able? But I'm glad because of the public broadcaster, the difference was I already learned so much from that experience where I'm like, stop underestimating yourself. Just take the lessons and run with it.
Wow. Yeah. That makes me feel amazing because I would never have thought you would think that way.
Are you kidding me?
Like, no, I think of you as way ahead of me in the broadcasting space just because of your experience. So I really appreciate that, but
I think you've got a brilliant mind.
I appreciate that.
And I think you've got a way that you approach and how you see things. And I said earlier, there are times when politicians want us to see things in a particular way, and it takes a few people to see when they're taking us for fools and to be able to make a proper analysis of what's going on that many people may not be able to see. You know, and there's pressure when you get into an environment like that. I was very nervous.
The public broadcaster, you feel the pressure because you're like, wow, this is not like some podcast somewhere, right? This is like in front of everyone before the nation. And I had never felt pressure like that. Like there's that moment where it's like, okay, 5, 4, and then and then it's just you.
Yeah.
Like it's just you in front of the cameras.
Yeah.
That took a lot of getting used to, I must say.
Yeah. I'm glad because I had already done live television before, but this was different.
Everywhere, like newsroom.
I was on ETV, I was on ENCA, I was on newsroom, and now on the public broadcaster. But you know, there's one thing to also read the news when you're an anchor, because that's what I've done on ENCA and newsroom. Because you're reading the news, there's an auto cue. You know, obviously you prepare your own questions, but you've got 10 minutes to do the interviews, and then you get to a show like this. And the way I've changed it is I do a comment. So I need to think critically about what am I going to say to the viewers tonight? What am I asking them? And then you need about 20, 30 minutes to also sit down and talk to a guest, or sometimes an hour, depending on who your guest is, which is a completely different ball game.
Yeah.
And you need to like make sure in those 20 minutes or in the 40 minutes, you're really getting what's important from the guest and what the viewers care about. So it's a lot of pressure.
It is. I want to show you one of your finest recent hours and ask you like how this came about. Check this moment of your interview, your now infamous or famous interview with Fikile Mbalula.
Is there policy differences, which is why I'm using the national minimum wage for a reason. I'm using the war in the Middle East for a reason, because that's where you don't see eye to eye. So in that 1 or 5% where you have fundamental differences in policy, how do you deal with it? That's
the minimum wage cannot be reversed.
Yeah, but that's it. I'm saying, what if you want to increase it by 1 rand? The DA doesn't believe in that.
The question is, there is no party that has got the veto power within the government of national unity. So for us to agree, it means that we put a threshold not of a single party. You must understand the 60% how it operates. Start with 50%, which would have included, if it was a grand coalition, 2 parties. But the fact that we have broadened that, reflective of the parties that are in the National Assembly to participate in the GNU, you have then raised the threshold to 60%. So it means of those parties that participate, that will determine broadly a bigger decision that needs to be taken within government.
And you as the ANC with 40%, let's say you've got the IFP, the DA, the PAC, the Good Party, that still doesn't give you 50%, does it? You need the DA. That's the point I'm trying to make.
It might as well happen that the DA disagrees, but I'm saying it does not have the veto power from not saying the decision cannot be taken. The threshold of 60% is of all the parties which will be participating.
And I'm saying you don't have the threshold of 60%. Put the DA aside. Take you, IFP, PAC, Good Party, PA. You don't have 50%. There's not much you can do on your own. At the end of the day, you are going to need the DA, even if it's just 10 members of the DA. You're going to need them in order to deal with any deadlock that you may have.
When you constitute government and you talk about 60% and political parties broadly that participate, the determination of the decisions, how they are taken in terms of cabinet, at the end of the day, should there be any other deadlock with regard to the executive, the deadlock breaking mechanism at your disposal is to negotiate and engage in a sufficient consensus. But it does not apply in terms of decision making such that a party can have a veto power over the executive decision making process. The question that must be interrogated, which is what I think you are in a hurry to make a determination about the DA veto, having vetoing powers, is that a single political party cannot stop the operations of the executive in this, unless institutionalized and reflected in the constitution of the country that that veto power, it is acceptable.
And the executive is the government of national unity, it's not the ANC, right?
The government of national unity is of all parties that participate.
Which is why you need an agreement. So as the ANC, when you say you can't stop the operations of the executive is not the ANC. The executive is the government of national unity. That's why those people need to agree. At the very least, 60% of them must agree. So but let's move on from it.
Oh my goodness.
I kept wanting to stop, but then it gets so engrossing. You're like, yeah. And that was at a really pivotal moment. For the country.
Yeah.
Which maybe watching it back, people don't realize is that when you do an interview, it's at the moment where the country doesn't know so much of the stuff.
Yeah.
And how do you look back on that particular moment? Because it was such a fascinating insight into how the ANC and the DA had not yet really fully agreed, even though they had formally agreed.
And for me, I think, because I had Helen Zille after that.
Yeah. Oh, yes, yeah. Shall we play that part as well?
I think it was the first time that they actually publicly disagreed on things. And
it was.
Helen being Helen was like, they don't know what they're talking about. They don't read the documents they sign. But for me, that's what I took from that moment was, I just realized, I was like, oh my God, there's a document of intent that was signed by these different parties, but clearly there is no agreement around what some of the subtext in that document actually mean, because they interpret them differently. To this day,
we still don't
that
have
60% is interpreted differently from the DA and the African National Congress.
Absolutely.
And
I don't even know if we have do we have a new document which actually tells us?
No, because I think they still need a national dialogue,
Oh,
not a dialogue, a policy conference of sorts where they're going to compromise on their different policies and have an agreed policy agenda, whatever that's going to look like. I'm looking forward to that. I mean, I saw that document of intent and I read it, and I was like, this is so fascinating. And when you ask them about it, I mean, you can hear Fikile Mbalula there, I just felt, with respect, was winging it.
Sure.
I don't think he was referencing the actual text. And for me, if there's a document that is the basis of your marriage in this so-called GNU or coalition, then you need to understand even the wording, because that has got implications. You need to, when there's a comma here and not a full stop there, those things actually matter.
Absolutely.
How it's worded. And I just felt like they didn't really understand that. And Helen Zille probably came in knowing very well how to structure certain wordings. And they probably took it for granted and thought that is not much. But Helen is showing them now that, oh, you thought I was being crazy when I purposely wanted this to be structured this way. But it was a crazy moment at the time.
Yeah, it also brings up the craft, because what I found interesting about that is that you weren't asking a lot of different questions. Like you were saying, you were actually focusing on one question. You know how long it took me to learn that? Like, you don't have to keep asking different questions. You just need to keep
Stick
the
to
one and make sure that is answered. And the way you did that there was a textbook example of like just sticking on the one thing and seeing the different divergences between the answers.
Yeah, I recently had an interview on the show on Face the Nation with the Secretary General of the MK Party, and I did the same thing. I think we probably spent about 8-10 minutes on one question.
Yeah.
What does your constitution say about dual membership? That's it. And he tried to go, well, it doesn't expressly state. Okay.
Yeah.
If Clement joins the MK Party, but he's a member of the EFF or the ANC, is that allowed? No. Okay, but Jacob Zuma is a member of the ANC before the expulsion.
Yeah.
Why is that allowed?
Yeah.
Well, but our constitution doesn't expressly. Okay, so, but why are you saying no to Clement? And the point I was trying to demonstrate there is different rules exist for your leader and different rules exist for your member. And I would rather you come and say, yeah, Vele, Jacob Zuma has his own rules. Ordinary members have their own rules, than try to portray a scenario where the leadership collective is treated the same way as ordinary members.
Absolutely.
Because all of you are accountable to the constitution. And some people think, oh, just move on. No.
Yeah.
That's a critical question that's supposed to determine what this party is about, how it's structured, how it holds its leaders accountable, and whether or not it treats leaders differently.
Yeah. And then people get offended from time to time, you know, working in this media landscape. We maybe don't talk enough about how one week you're a propagandist for Fikile Mbalula, the next week it's Helen Zille, the next week now it's MK, but we thought you were on our side. Why are you asking these difficult questions? You know, how do you deal with that? And in particular, there was an incident, you know, there you were asking very hard questions of the ANC, but at the Results Operations Center, there was a moment where DA leader John Steenhuisen actually refused to speak to you and said that you were any observer could see that you were unfair to the DA, and you were actually campaigning against them on your show to some I may be paraphrasing slightly. You know, what did you make of that particular moment and what it said about how you're constantly, you know, between a rock and a hard place in the journalistic world? So,
first of all, I've realized with the work I do that actually you are onto something when you are constantly, because I've been called, I hate MK and Zuma. Then I was told, you love MK and Zuma.
Yeah.
If I praise them on something. Then I was told, you are an EFF supporter.
Okay.
And then when I suddenly question them on VBS or any other issue, you hate the EFF, or you decampaign the DA, and then you love the DA. So I'm used to that. Like, you can never pin me to a particular party, and I'm happy about that, because if that's not a demonstration to you of how neutral I am, then I don't know what else will be. Oh, but John Steenhuisen, I mean, I don't know, man. I just feel like, and I say this with so much respect, because to this day I still pitch interviews with him. In fact, tonight, the producers are busy trying to get him to come on my show.
Let's hope he does.
He will never. But if he does, I'll eat my hat. So I feel like he's politically immature. And again, I say that with respect. The reason I say that is because I have interviewed people that I've differed with. Like, ahead of elections, as a broadcaster who does the kind of show I do, people listen to you for analysis. They want to know, what do you think of what Julia's just said? What do you think of how the DA's approach is, or the EFF's messaging, the ANC's campaigns? People listen to me for some analysis. They're interested to hear my view. And I do that about any other political party.
And it's your job. Like, you have to have a view on whatever's happening.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like you wake up and just always have a view. You're paid to have a view like every weekday.
So John feels like I've been unfair to him. I'm like, point me to the direction where I've been unfair to you. If I've said to you that I think you're the weakest leader the DA has ever had, it's not because I hate you, I don't like you. It's because that's my analysis. And I may be very wrong, by the way, but it's my analysis. And you're welcome to come and challenge me on that. And I'll tell you why I think you're the weakest leader. I mean, I've spoken of Helen Zille. I've said things about Helen Zille on my show, but not once has Helen Zille said, I'm not going to come on your show because you're unfair to me, because she's politically mature. She understands the political environment within which she operates. Same way goes with the EFF. I mean, there's many times when I've criticized Julius or Floyd Shivambu.
Absolutely.
Or Advocate Dali Mpofu.
Indeed.
Not once have they ever said to me, we're not coming. And they may very well, sometimes after our interviews, they're like, yeah, but I thought you were unfair on this. I was like, no, I was just doing this. Trust me, next week if I call them, they come through. Phil and Balula.
Yeah.
The same thing happens over and over again. And it's so disappointing to see politicians who behave like that, where they're unable to take criticism. I get criticized all the time. I've been called a biased journalist. I've been called a white monopoly capital journalist. I've been called a Tumamina journalist. I've been called a radical leftist,
so you're all
racist
of those things
journalist.
at once.
I'm everything at once. I'm radical left and radical right at the same time. So, but I've never gone, oh, that politician has said this about me, I don't ever want them on my show. Because I understand, I work in an environment where my work is actually going to be judged and it's open to different interpretations. And I'm comfortable with that. What saddens me is when you occupy the union buildings. Now you are part of a government. The responsibilities are different now.
Yeah.
You can't. Now you speak to South Africans. My platform has people who listen who are South Africans, people you serve as a minister. So for you not to want to subject yourself to accountability on my show because you've got issues I said about you before the elections, that's weird. And there's something else that's also happened recently, Sizo, which it makes me sad to even speak about it, because you don't expect it from such people. I interviewed the president recently on my show. And I asked a question about Phala Phala. And then we went to the results center. And I remember the producers were running around. They rushed to Kumbuzo Nchaven, who's the minister in the presidency, whom I've enjoyed a good relationship with.
Sure.
We talk on WhatsApp. I always go to her, hey, I need you on my show tomorrow. So she says, no, yes. And I remember the producers went to her to go get her. And I remember she's like, I don't want to talk to him. And when I asked the producers, oh, why? She said, no, she wants nothing to talk to you because you've nearly cost her a job because you asked the president about Phala Phala.
No ways.
And I was like,
you had a tough time at The Rock.
that is so weird. I mean, man, John Steenhuisen? I mean, now you've got a minister in the president. What is wrong with asking the president about Phala Phala?
Absolutely. I'm sure, I mean, anyone, and you know what would have happened if you didn't ask that question? Is people would have said, how can you not ask that? Yeah.
What is that? Imagine you've got a president. You're talking about his time in this position as the president of the ANC, as the president of the country who wants to return as president of the country. You don't talk about the biggest scandal that has confronted him. It's not my problem that you guys are going to deal with a PR nightmare post my interview. But to be angry at me because for some reason I asked a basic question that any other journalist would have asked. It's so wild to me. And it saddens me because I feel like we're entering a sphere now where politicians or ministers are personalizing things.
So
where
true.
I interviewed the premier of Limpopo as well, Popi Ramathuba. I asked about someone that she has appointed as an MEC who was found wanting by the Department of International Relations because we lost 100 million rand on some plot of land in New York that doesn't exist. Remember that story?
Yeah.
This person went through the processes. And yes, he's not the one, he didn't steal any money, but he didn't do due diligence. And I was asking the premier, but how do you appoint someone when you see that they did this at the Department of International Relations? Were you satisfied? And she took offense to the question. And all I wanted is to just get an explanation of her saying, oh no, the matter has been resolved. He's given an explanation to me. We're good to go. He took so much offense that my producers were now telling me she doesn't ever want to come on this show ever again.
Yeah.
What kind of environment is that where when journalists ask questions they need answers to, you personalize them and you don't want to talk to them again? That for me is so sad and is political immaturity.
So true.
With all
And
due respect.
I'm so glad you've spoken about it, because many people don't see what happens
And they
behind the
don't know.
scenes, right? And then people don't come on your show, and then people start asking you, why are people not coming on your show? Meanwhile, they've taken a decision, not you.
Not to come.
And there's a climate of pressure for sure that comes from multiple different angles. And as someone at the center of that, you still have to try and bring integrity to your show. And not say that, okay, I'm just going to ask easy questions of my guests.
I'm sorry. I would rather have you declare me persona non grata and never want to come on my show again.
Sure.
But I'm not going to compromise myself and my career like that. And I've got people that I get along with. I mean, me and Bantu Olumisa, we're supposed to play golf.
Yeah.
We talk. Like me and, the US ambassador played golf together. I invited him at my home cause during the time when South Africans were hating him.
Yeah.
And people see me play golf, but they know the minute he comes on my show, he's not a guy I played golf with. And he did come on my show probably 2 or 3 more times. And I take him on because that doesn't mean that I agree with everything that he does. And I think that's what we need to learn. It's like when you see, Julius Malema hugging President Cyril Ramaphosa, you're like, why are they hugging?
Yeah.
They're human beings who actually are colleagues in parliament.
Absolutely.
They work together in politics. But when they get into parliament and Julius switches on the mic, he's not talking to an elder here. He's talking to a fellow compatriot, someone who is on another side, and he's going to hold them accountable. That doesn't mean afterwards they mustn't shake hands.
Yeah.
Why can't we do that as journalists? I take you up, I ask you the tough questions. At the end of the day, I was doing my job, you were doing your job. If you feel I'm biased, challenge me on that. If I feel you are evading questions, I'm going to challenge you on that. It's just so sad that now ministers and politicians want to be treated like sweethearts. That's not my job. And maybe ministers are used to that, because everywhere you go, you must go. When you interview ministers, sometimes the team around them, Minister, do you want water? Deputy Minister, MEC, do you want this? MEC, are you happy with the temperature?
Yeah.
That's not my job.
Absolutely.
I'm not going to treat you like a queen. I'm here to treat you, and I will respect you because you are someone in authority. And I will respect anybody. Even if I was interviewing a petrol attendant or anybody, a fellow journalist, I will respect you and I expect the same of me. But sometimes I think they get caught up in the position. And because people around them are always worshipping them and bowing their heads, oh, Minister MEC, and then they expect us to do the same. No, it's not going to happen.
What was it like to interview the president? And do you often see things, and I'm just interested in how the president acts even before an interview, and what it was like to speak to him, again, at a crucial moment, just before the election. What's he like, and what was it like to interview him at that time?
So, the president is he's a lovely, kind person. Who's not? I think Jacob Zuma, as Naledi Pando told you, was a lovely person.
Yeah.
So what I do pick up though is sometimes...
Fam, you asked for some SMWX merch and we have delivered. I know you're always looking for ways to help support and grow this channel. So why don't you buy yourself an SMWX hoodie? super comfy, super warm, and you can represent SMWX. You can check the link down below for how to buy your SMWX hoodie and help build and grow this channel so we can bring you more interviews, more analysis, and more educational insights. Now let's get back to it.
He'll come and be so kind. It's like, how are you, Clement? And then says these nice things. And it's almost like to cripple you a little bit so that you feel bad when you ask questions. Or he's genuinely just like a lovely guy who just likes doing the banter, which I appreciate. You don't need to come and just be stuck up and like I'm the president, let's go. He's a cool guy, so that's the first thing you pick up.
Interpersonally, you hear that a lot. Like both he and Zuma are like really brilliant with the stuff.
They are. Their banter is quite incredible. So I appreciate that. So that's the first thing you pick up with President Cyril Ramaphosa. I mean, that, as you say, that was a crucial moment. In fact, we were the only media house that spoke to him before the elections. He was actually supposed to do a whole, media, but pala question that I asked clearly ruffled the feathers, and they were probably scared that other media houses were going to do that.
Wow.
But anyway, it was that, and then interviewing him was cool. I found him I always say President Cyril Ramaphosa, the people sometimes around him sort of prevent him from taking certain questions, and I think he's very much capable of doing it.
I fully agree. I think he's protected
too much,
he's coddled, and he's actually the weapon that they should use to go out.
I don't think they realize that.
Absolutely. I'm like, I don't know why they protect him from so many interviews.
Yes. Bulemabe, when he was spokesperson, used to go when we're asking questions, maybe during a press briefing, and then he'll say, no, that is the last question. The president wants to go, no, it's okay. Many times where the president says, no, Pule, it's okay, let them ask that question. And I just feel like the president sometimes is surrounded by people who don't realize how brilliant he is in handling the questions.
Yeah, agreed.
And I picked it up even like now. It's like, you can tell that there's like, this guy can hold his own. Whether he's going to give you the answer you like on Pala or on anything else, on Jacob Zuma starting a party, whether he's going to give you an answer you like or not, but he's going to give you an answer.
Yeah.
And he's going to stick to it. And he's going to speak with so much confidence. But they're so scared. They just protect him too much, where they're like, we shouldn't go there. We shouldn't go here. When, in fact, realize the strength that he has.
Because otherwise speculation ends up filling that vacuum anyway.
Absolutely.
No, it was really cool. Is there anyone... I'm so jealous of your interview with Trevor Noah. I'm like...
Can I tell you a funny story?
Please.
I went to the gym probably 2 weeks or so after that interview, and I find this guy. So I was doing meetings. I just finished my stuff at the gym, and I was just doing meetings on Zoom, and I finished the meeting. A guy comes to me and says, hi, you're Clement Manyathela, hey? I was like, yeah. I was like, yeah, I love your show, bro. I'm a big fan, but I didn't agree with you on one thing. The interview with Trevor. You were too excited. You were giggling the whole time.
Yeah.
I was like, it's Trevor Noah. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
Do you want me to just go close my eyes? Of course I'm giggling. One, I'm a proud South African to be talking to someone who has put this country on a map.
Absolutely.
What a gent, what a legend. But also, I'm giggling because I'm a big fan. I've followed Trevor Noah for the longest time. I love his comedy. I watch his shows. I don't miss any of his stuff. So I'm a big fan. So of course I'm going to giggle, which takes us back to our point that they expect you to be a robot.
Absolutely.
Don't be excited. Don't be angry. No, sometimes you meet people that you're like, oh my God, that you admire.
So true. So when I interviewed Jacob Zuma, and I freely admit this, like I was overawed. I was just like, it's actually Zuma, and I'm talking to him right now, like the whole time. It took me like 20 minutes to snap out of it. So if you go back to that interview, I give him this like amazing introduction. He's like this leader who's beloved by all South Africans. And it was just because I was like, I'm interviewing Jacob Zuma.
What is happening here?
This person you've seen and you've even criticized sometime. And then you see them in the flesh and you're like, wow, this is a totally different experience, and it takes a while to sometimes snap out of that.
True. I've had so many of those moments. I interviewed advocate Kekana recently on my radio show, and I was like, from the onset, I was like, I just want to say I'm a big fan. And also being a big fan, people don't get it. Doesn't mean when you are giggling or you're laughing at things or you admire people, doesn't mean you also don't have difficult conversations with them. And it doesn't mean you don't challenge them, And I think that's the thing about, so yeah, that guy at the gym was like, yeah, you were just giggling the whole time, man. I hated that interview. I was like, wow. Okay, thanks for the feedback.
Yeah, gee.
But yeah, that was a lovely moment with Trevor.
That was really cool.
Yeah. And he's such a kind man, He kept on saying during the break, he kept on saying, oh man, I appreciate South Africans. I appreciate what people are doing. I appreciate you, man. Yeah. Like, he's such a normal guy who actually gives you feedback. And actually, a friend of his, Adele, actually said to me, because they then had lunch, I think, afterwards, later on. Yeah. And then Adele sent me a message on WhatsApp and said, dude, Trevor for the second or third time just sent me a text again saying, oh my God, I enjoyed that interview with Clement. He's that kind of a guy who will even give you feedback, who will even tell you if you do it when you're doing well. Yeah. He's how proud he is of you. You're like, dude, you're Trevor Noah. Stop it.
That's just unfair.
Yeah.
That's just unfair. Anyone you'd particularly like to interview who you haven't? I mean, you've interviewed virtually everyone at this point.
In the country, I'd like to speak to Donald Trump.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I would like to sit with Donald Trump. I feel like maybe I'm going to understand him. Because the things I read about and what I see and what I hear are so wild. Yeah. Where I'm like, maybe we need to have let's have a frank, honest conversation. Yeah. Maybe he's going to tell us, okay, this is what's popping.
What would you ask? First question.
Are you okay? No, seriously, are you okay? With respect, are you okay?
That's such an interesting first question.
Yeah, and I hope he's not going to get up and leave, but he could just get up and leave after that question.
That would be fascinating.
Yeah, I would love to sit down with Donald Trump. That would be amazing. On the country, also we've interviewed so many people. Yeah. I always used to think of Christo Visser, and I've interviewed him both on my radio show and on some project I'm working on, television show, which will be on the SABC. I've interviewed him. So Irvin Khoza, I would love to interview Irvin Khoza. Yeah.
What was the toughest moment that you've ever faced in an interview, and what was the most rewarding one?
Toughest moment in an interview. So I can't think of a specific interview where I had the toughest moment, but I can think of times when you do an interview and you get something wrong. That's very difficult for me because
you expect it to be perfect, right?
You are expected to be perfect, but also you've over-prepared.
Sure.
Like, how did I miss that detail? So
I have an interview in mind.
Is it?
Yeah.
Ooh, I hate that. Like, when I guess, and I'm not talking about, like, yesterday I had Aaron Monsalud on my show and he says, Clement, before I start, I must correct 3 things. First of all, you said I'm a Home Affairs Minister. I'm Health Minister. Yeah. Because I did say Home Affairs because he was there for so long, man.
And politicians love to do that. Like, before we start, let me correct.
Correct. Are you thinking, okay, I made a fundamental mistake? I was like, please, let's move on. I'm not talking about that. Like, I'm just talking about like a critical detail that Helen Ziller. I remember I had Helen Ziller in studio. This is probably around 2022, late 2021. Yeah. And I had in studio at our Cape Town studio. I was in Cape Town at the time, and I made a reference about the DA's performance at the polls, and I had gotten it wrong, the percentage, but not just the percentage, just broadly. Either I probably said you lost or you guys gained. And you know Helen.
Oh yeah.
Oh, she is going to maximize and rise to the occasion on that moment. And she made it. She was like, that is wrong. I would have expected that you would have read and researched. And it was just a small detail that,
Yeah.
But you know what? You're not perfect.
Absolutely.
You're always going to get some things wrong. You're always going to forget other things.
Yeah.
Just get up and keep it going.
Absolutely.
And that's what,
And you're working under time pressure as well, right? You have to... I interviewed Gayton on the SABC.
Yeah.
And the SABC wanted the show to be very confrontational. I had a similar thing to you where that's not necessarily who I am. So it took a while. And I was going and I was probing, and then I got one thing wrong. And I saw it in Gayton's eyes. He was like,
this is my moment.
But how do you say that when it was this year and this year and this? And I was like, I prepared so much, but that one little wrong. And he was brilliant. Like, he seized it, he exploited it, and he completely showed it.
Yeah.
And then you feel like,
but you move on, man. Also, I've realized that viewers and listeners are so forgiving.
True.
Like, we spent the 2 days thinking, oh my God, I got things so wrong. You're so depressed. Listeners have already forgotten
some
about it.
people even support you. No, he was right.
Yes, they'll even say, no, he should have understood it like this. So I think that's the toughest moment. The most rewarding?
Yeah.
I think for me, the most rewarding is when you help viewers understand more on a subject matter. And I'll give you an example, the GNU.
Yeah.
And I think for me, our show was so crucial during that time because we were able to bring in these guys who are part of this marriage. And we were able to get South Africans to understand how crazy this arrangement is.
Yeah.
And not just crazy in terms of, people don't understand each other, but crazy in terms of how are they going to manage their differences? And I think when you get to a point where you get politicians to actually express something that's going to help the viewer understand the subject matter more, that for me is a rewarding moment. Or when and it doesn't always have to embarrass you or the next person. Like even the MK Party Secretary General, when he's unable, at the end of the day, I said, yes or no? Does your constitution allow? And he said, yes and no, because on the yes, he couldn't win. On the no, it was weird. So, but what that showed to South Africans is that there's something wrong in this organization where the president of the party is allowed to do certain things and it's okay, but other people will not be allowed to do it. And you make up your mind what you think that means. For me, that's always the most rewarding thing, when we are able to crack something and get listeners to see, or viewers to see, a perspective that probably wasn't so clear and glaring before. That's the most rewarding thing for me in an interview.
Finally, because you've become quite central to the reporting on the GNU, how do you see it, and what do you think are the opportunities and the threats behind this new coalition moment in our politics?
So I said this already, and some people didn't like my comment, but I care about the majority of people in the country. I care about everyone, but I'm more focused on them because they're the ones that are unemployed. When we talk about the highest levels of inequality, they're the ones that are at the receiving end, at the lower level. So when I look at the GNU, I locate it within the context of the majority of people in this country. So that's the context.
Sure.
So I don't think the GNU is going to change the lives of the majority of people in this country who are the poorest of the poor, who are unemployed, who are not participating sufficiently in this economy, who are not even owners of this economy. Because, and I said, I feel like the GNU is going to be a caretaker kind of an administration where let's just do the day-to-day, just do the services. Let's just make sure that service delivery is there. But that's not what we need in this country right now after 30 years of our democracy, with the kind of realities that the majority of black people in this country live under. We need a radical change. We do. We need when I say radical change, I'm not saying, let's be unconstitutional or take reckless decisions. I'm saying we need a government that's going to be bold enough to take decisions that some people may not like, including the markets.
Yeah.
But they know that these are decisions that are going to fundamentally change the lives of the majority of people in this country. And I don't think the GNU is going to do that because there's so much to compromise on. There's so much to compromise on. They have to meet each other somewhere. And of how ideologically different some of these organizations are on specific things, especially things that are supposed to change the lives of the majority of people in this country. And for me, that's my biggest concern. I feel like we have to wait for 2029. Let's get a new government, and hopefully there's a government that gets a decisive victory, and then we can start talking about what are they doing to change the lives of people on the ground who are the marginalized, who are forgotten. Under this new structure, I sadly don't see it. And I hope I'll be proven wrong.
Clement Manyathela, thank you so much for joining us on SMWX.
Thank you so much, brother. This was great.
Aye, yeah.